Uber has now partnered with Arrival to make the first ever electric vehicle specifically designed for ride sharing. And this is super interesting. So I'm on Hypebeast right now. This is how the car looks, the Arrival Rideshare EV. And going down here, after announcing their partnership back in May, Uber and Arrival have now unveiled the Arrival Car, a collaborative EV designed specifically for ride sharing. Designed primarily with functionality and comfort in mind, the new vehicle carries a very simple design on its exterior, largely resembling a minivan with a slightly more futuristic twist. So they made a video, we're going to watch this, and this is super unique because they thought everything about ride sharing, tried to optimize this one vehicle pretty much from the ground up, only with ride sharing in mind.
Arrival, the Anglo-American startup looking to build electric buses and delivery vans, is now ready to show off its first electric car. Designed in partnership with Uber, it's not a car for you and me, but a 21st century taxi designed specifically for rideshare drivers.
See, that's pretty interesting to me. First off, it's like super interesting that they're making this just for ride sharing. I think that's showing how big ride sharing is getting. To make a car just with the idea of Uber in mind is pretty unique to me, considering obviously there's a bunch of other cars out there that anyone could just use. So it's kind of cool that they're like, hey, we're going to make an electric car only with ride sharing in mind.
The company is setting an ambitious timetable to get this product from the early alpha prototype, which is what I saw when I visited the company's Oxfordshire HQ, to the finished model. Now, these first finished models are expected to roll off the production line at some point in Q3 2023, which in car development terms is absolutely nothing. Now, the car has a similar footprint to a VW Golf or Honda Civic, but is dramatically taller, making it easy to get in and out of. Now,
so one thing I'm going to say right in the beginning is I love the window space. I feel like when it comes to driving, a lot of times, as you can imagine, everyone takes Ubers and Lyfts now when they get around, but I love the top part, like the top part right here. I think that's super unique because I feel like for a lot of people, let's say especially if you're going to a new area, to be able to look up and see kind of everything around you and have that increased visibility, I feel like it makes the ride a lot more memorable and a lot more just visual in nature.
All of the propulsion is based on an EV skate under the floor. There's no need for a lengthy bonnet or trunk, but that doesn't seem to compromise the room inside the cabin. In fact, I've seen museum visitor centres that are smaller than the inside of the Arrival.
Yeah, it looks pretty spacious.
The front passenger seat can also be folded down and pushed slightly forward should you need that little bit of extra room, and in the prototype at least, there are brightly coloured woven fabrics for seat covers and a spill-resistant floor.
That's a very underrated thing, the spill-resistant floor. I mean, I say to a lot of drivers, you don't really need candy and snacks in your car. Maybe back in the day that was common, but the one thing I do suggest is having like paper towels or napkins. The amount of times you can have a spill in your car is fortunately way too high, so I like that.
Now, despite the utilitarian styling, the seats are comfortable enough that your backside won't get numb in a 20-minute trip around a city centre.
I feel like that's kind of, I mean, that's a great feature. I don't think I've ever had someone complain like, oh, my butt's sore from sitting too long in this Uber. But hey, you know, they're trying to think of everything to really optimize the ride, make it more enjoyable for everybody.
And it's just a little bit sci-fi, enough that it does feel like a car from the near future, at least compared to a lot of the modern car designs you see today. Much like Tesla's Model 3, all of the controls are held in a 13-inch touchscreen in the center console to make...
That's one thing I'm kind of curious too is, I'm assuming will automatically connect to, let's say, your app or whatever, because obviously one of the things that you need to think about when it comes to driving, kind of goes without saying, is you need a phone. I've seen some people use their phone, of course. It's kind of the typical thing when it comes to drivers. I've also seen some people use their iPads and other kind of tablets to use Uber and Lyft. So with this, I wonder if you just basically sign in and it connects with everything, which means it has to somehow have some type of data or 3G, or in this case now 5G or whatever, some type of data or internet connection capabilities. Or let's say, is it something that will just connect to your phone somehow or whatever? Kind of curious how that will happen.
easier for both drivers to use and for the company to produce left and right-hand drive versions of the same car. Now, it's hoped that this single screen will help do away with so much of the clutter that most rideshare drivers currently need to lean on. I will admit I didn't get to drive the prototype, but I did drive Arrival's beefy UPS van around its test track, which is actually just the company's staff car park. But despite the truck's massive size, it's actually pretty fun to drive. I mean, it moves like a go-kart and it's so easy to get in and start piloting. I was quite intimidated and I thought I was going to make an absolute hash of it, but the ease of driving makes me feel like a lot of rideshare drivers are going to love that direct connection to the road.
So I've not driven like a Tesla yet or an electric vehicle. I'm curious, for those who have, definitely let me know anything in the comments, because I know people have said, look, after driving, like say a Tesla, for example, you look at regular cars, right, that powered on gas and everything as almost just obsolete, almost just super old school. And I've heard that from a lot, that maybe this will help improve driving and hopefully improve safety, right? As we all know, electric vehicles way smarter when it comes to just dealing with human error. So maybe this will improve a lot of just situations that might occur from driving in, everyday life.
Now, of course, there are lots of things that we just don't know about this car, including the battery capacity, the range, the price, or what it'll actually look like when it...
That's a big thing is, I feel like, and this is a big kind of bottleneck when it comes to electric cars, they're probably going to figure this out as the years go on, is the charging capability. I mean, a lot of drivers, whether you're doing it part-time or full-time, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit later in the video, but, if you want to drive part-time, you're going to do 2 hours in the morning to do your morning commute, okay. But a lot of drivers go into it being like, I'm going to do an 8-hour shift. Getting gas takes you, a few minutes to pull over, pump it, let's say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, let's say 10 minutes maximum. If this takes a half an hour to charge, and you have to do that 3 or 4 times a day, that's almost an hour plus you're now spending just sitting there doing nothing.
Finally finished. But if Arrival can ensure that it'll run for a whole day on a single charge and won't cost as much as the equivalent Prius, for instance, it's likely that Uber and its ride-sharing ilk can use this car as the main weapon in their plans to get zero tailpipe emissions from their fleets.
So let me know what you think in the comments. I mean, I love the idea. I think there's a couple of advantages to this that are huge. One, I think the biggest thing is the environmental impact. As we all know, global warming is a massive issue, and electric vehicles do help with that. So this is a huge thing, especially with ridesharing getting significantly more popular. To have a ton of Ubers on the road that are all electric, that's huge. And obviously Uber's now doing Uber Green, which really incentivizes drivers to use things like Priuses and hybrid cars and, of course, electric vehicles. One thing I'm curious about with this is 2 things really jump into my head. One, like I said, is the charging capability and how long the battery is going to last. I think that's the number one thing, because if, let's say, you can, like I said, only use it for a certain amount of miles, and that means you have to charge it a few times a day, I know a lot of drivers are going to say, look, that's eating into my earnings. I'm sitting there doing nothing. Now, one kind of solution to this, and this is where things get even trickier, is if, let's say, you could have multiple options when it comes to this Arrival car. What I mean is, let's say you're like, all right, I'm gonna run out of battery soon. You go to, let's say, a station and you go and pick up a car that's already pre-charged. So in a sense, you're not really charging the car back up, you're just swapping between vehicles. That might make it a lot easier. That way you're not spending any time charging. But then you have to obviously add in the whole factor of, well, let's say, and again, I'm just throwing this out there, they do happen to do that. Well, I may have to pull all the way over or drive all the way over to a station that's a specific Arrival station to swap vehicles. That may be faster, but also may be slower, depending on how you look at it. So I think the biggest thing, the first thing that pops in my head is really the battery situation. How they're going to be able to do that, making sure, like I said, and like you said too, can you run this vehicle all day? Because like I said, most drivers do not do it in a part-time sense. Even for me, when I was doing it part-time, I did the morning, evening commutes, Friday and Saturday nights. Even like say on a typical Monday, so a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the evening, Monday isn't the best time to drive. I'm still looking at least a few hours in the morning, a few hours at night. So let's say about 6 hours-ish total. I don't want to have to do the morning commute, go charge it, do the evening commute, then go charge again because I have to get ready for the next morning, the next day after. That's just a massive hassle. The second thing, and this is another big one, is how do the finances work? Now, of course, the environmental impact is the number one thing when it comes to this. Huge issue when it comes to global warming. So that's good that this is helping solve that. But the big thing that pops in mind is, well, as a driver, do I have to spend more money to rent this? Is Uber going to purchase all these vehicles and lease them out and have me loan or rent the vehicle from Uber? Or are there going to be other third-party companies that do this? The way the math works out to me is the number one thing. I've already done a couple of videos about should you rent through Uber or should you rent through Lyft. Not going to lie, I'm going to be blunt. The rental programs, I just think they're unbelievably expensive. I mean, you're looking at spending sometimes around $250 a week to rent a vehicle, which means if you do want to drive, you're already negative $250 in the hole. You have to drive enough to, let's say, make $250 just to break even. And of course, everything past that is profit, but still annoying. On average, I say the drivers will make about $20 to $25 an hour if you look at all the cities, and obviously this is not just here in America, maybe worldwide. So let's put it on the low end, let's say 20 an hour. That means you're gonna have to drive, like say the car's $250 a week, about 12-ish hours, let's say, was it 12 and a half or whatever it is, 12 and a half hours just to break even. That means you're almost gonna drive, not maybe full on part-time, but you're gonna drive a good amount just to fully break even, and then anything on top of that's profit. I don't think they're gonna sell these cars. I may be wrong, but I feel like these are the type of vehicles that are gonna be specifically designed just for Uber, and you can only obtain an Arrival vehicle when it comes to the Arrival ride-sharing vehicles if you wanna drive, which means you're almost forced, in a sense, to have to purchase this vehicle. And then that adds a whole other financial component to it that's unbelievably unfortunate. Now, that may change. Maybe they say, hey, you know what? Because I'm not gonna lie, I would drive that. I actually think that's a cool car. Even ignoring ride sharing, Uber and Lyft and everything, I would definitely drive a vehicle like that. I love the spaciousness of it. I love the look. I love the futuristic look. I also want to get an electric vehicle at some point. And also, I think the biggest thing, like I said earlier, I love the visual component as well. But I think the financial aspect is going to be, I think, another big bottleneck on top of the battery situation. Because if this is going to be pricey for drivers, a lot of drivers are going to say, well, why would I use it? Now, maybe Uber will try to work something out. Remember, the money has to come from somewhere. It has to come out of somebody's pocket. So maybe Uber will say, hey, you know what? Because we're trying to promote green energy, we're trying to promote electric vehicles, we're doing a special offer where this is only $100 a week to rent, as opposed to a typical gas-powered vehicle that's only $200 to rent, because we want to really promote these vehicles. But remember, that money is now coming out of Uber's pocket, which means that might be a temporary thing. Maybe they do that for a year, and they want to get those tax breaks from being a green energy company and using, environmentally friendly resources. But it is tough to say. I think I love the idea. I love the concept. I love the prototype as well. I think everything's huge when it comes to this in terms of being a great idea. Like I said, the two biggest things, the bottleneck of the whole battery situation and how long you can drive it for. And again, you can either solve that by having a battery run all day, or by somehow making a station where you can swap out vehicles really quick. And the second big bottleneck is the financial component. How this is going to work when it comes to drivers. Do they have to rent it? Do they have to buy it? How are the finances going to work?